I pulled into the driveway that evening, with the same hopeful rhythm I had carried too many times before. My bag was packed, the sunscreen still faintly sticky on my arms, and the car smelled like coconut lotion, mixed with the faint sweetness of gas station snacks I had picked up for the trip. I told myself this time would be different. This time I would belong. When she opened the door, her face carried no surprise, just mild irritation, as if I had interrupted her while she was balancing the checkbook. Then came the words, "We figured you'd be fine alone." For a moment, everything slowed. The sound of luggage wheels bumping across the porch, the distant laughter from inside, the faint hum of the air conditioner pushing out cold air into the hallway. I stood there, blinking once, twice, trying to decide if I had misheard. I hadn't. She said it clearly, without hesitation, like she was telling me where to hang my coat. No raised voice, no cruelty on the surface. Just that casual dismissal wrapped in a smile too thin to be kind. I nodded. What else could I do in that instant? My throat burned, but my face didn't move. My hands, sweaty from gripping the strap of my bag, loosened. I set it down gently, as if the porch might shatter under its weight. She stepped aside just enough to let the warm light spill across the doorway, but not enough to invite me in. Behind her, I caught a glimpse of bags lined neatly by the stairs. Sun hats, sunglasses, printed boarding passes on the table. They were ready. Ready without me. My father was in the kitchen, stirring something in a pot he clearly didn't intend to eat. My sister sat in the living room with her husband, laughing over something on her phone, like this was just another evening, like I hadn't been erased from the picture. I told myself to breathe slowly, to keep my voice even. I smiled, a small curve that hurt more than a scream would have, and then I turned back toward my car. In that silence, between the porch light flickering and the click of the door shutting behind me, I decided, if they believed I was fine alone, I would show them exactly what fine looked like. That night, my phone buzzed with a payment request. The number glowed on the screen like a neon sign. $100 here, $500 there, then finally the total $5,100. Their share of flights and villa. My name wasn't on the guest list, but my wallet was supposed to be. I didn't rage. I didn't throw the phone across the room. Instead, I smiled again, this time sharper. I sent them exactly $1. Along with a note, "You'll have a surprise." The moment I hit send, a current ran through me. It wasn't triumph, not yet. It was something colder, a kind of clarity you only get when a wound finally stops bleeding and hardens into scar. I leaned back against the headboard in my dark bedroom, the soft hum of the fan pushing warm air across my skin. I thought about the times before birthdays, anniversaries, holidays when I had been pushed to the edges, photographed only if I leaned into the frame, thanked only if someone remembered at the last minute. I thought about the gifts I bought that went unwrapped, the meals I cooked that no one ate, the nights I stayed up helping while being told later I had done nothing. This night was no different, just louder. I stared at the text thread until the letters blurred. My sister had replied with a laughing emoji, then another message dripping with sarcasm. "Don't be dramatic. You'll be fine." My jaw clenched. Dramatic. That word followed me like a curse, an excuse to ignore me whenever I protested, a way to dismiss every bruise, every slight, every exclusion. So I let it settle. I placed the phone face down, but the glow of the screen still leaked through the edges like an unwanted nightlight. I lay there, hearing the neighbors' sprinklers hiss and sputter, imagining the sound of rolling suitcases at the airport, imagining their voices rising in the morning as they boarded without me. I closed my eyes, but sleep refused. Instead, my mind replayed every detail from the porch, the weight of the bag strap on my shoulder, the way her hand rested on the doorframe, nails freshly painted, tapping once, twice, as if keeping time to her own patience, the shadow of the staircase behind her, each step leading to a plan I was not part of. And then, like a tide rising without warning, a thought surfaced. They weren't ready. Not for the message I had just sent, not for the silence I would keep, not for the way I would turn their trip inside out. I sat up, grabbed my laptop, and typed in the flight number I had memorized from weeks of family group chats. There were still seats available. My smile widened, this time not bitter, but deliberate. If they thought I'd be fine alone, they were about to see how fine I could be with a front row seat to their unraveling. The clock read 11:42 p.m. when I confirmed the booking. My heart pounded, not from fear, but from a strange calmness, like stepping into cold water and realizing the shock has already passed. I didn't message anyone. I didn't announce my plan. I let the quiet grow, filling the room like smoke, and in that quiet, I promised myself something. This time, the story would not end with me being the forgotten one. Outside, a car door slammed somewhere down the street. A dog barked twice, then stopped. I leaned back, closed my laptop, and whispered to myself, they weren't ready for this. And for the first time in years, I believed it. The morning sun poured through the blinds like liquid gold, but I did not feel its warmth. My alarm buzzed at 6, even though I had barely slept. My suitcase sat half-packed on the floor, open like a mouth waiting to be fed. Inside were rolled shirts, sandals, and the book I always pretended I would read on vacations. I zipped it shut with a steady hand, my chest tight with a quiet determination. I left earlier than necessary, not because I wanted to wait at the airport, but because I wanted to avoid the chance of bumping into them before the plan unfolded. The streets were empty, still damp from the night sprinklers. I drove in silence, the hum of the engine loud against the emptiness inside me. At the airport parking lot, I found a spot in long-term and sat for a moment, with my hands on the steering wheel. The smell of coconut lotion still clung to me, the ghost of yesterday's optimism. I shook my head, grabbed my bag, and joined the slow stream of travelers wheeling their luggage toward the terminal. Inside, the air was cold and buzzing with announcements. Families clustered together, friends snapped photos, children tugged at rolling suitcases with too much energy. I kept my hood up, earphones in, though no music played. I wanted to blend into the noise, to be invisible until the moment I decided otherwise. I moved quickly through security, my boarding pass tucked between two fingers like a secret. When I finally reached the gate, I saw them. My family sat in a cluster of seats near the window, my father clutching his travel folder like a relic, my mother tapping her foot impatiently, my sister laughing at something on her phone while her husband leaned in. They looked content, oblivious, like nothing had been taken from me. My throat tightened. I stood behind a column, half hidden, watching them. For years, I had been on the outside looking in, but this time, the distance was deliberate. I let the minutes tick by until the final boarding call echoed overhead. Then I slipped into line with Group 4, sliding past them as they argued with the gate agent about a window seat. The carpeted jet bridge smelled of metal and recycled air. My palms were damp, my heart steady in its strange rhythm. I stepped onto the plane, found my seat in the middle of a row, and sank down with my head bowed. No one noticed. Not even them, seated several rows ahead, already chatting as if paradise had begun. Hours later, the plane cut through blue sky and endless clouds. The flight attendants passed out drinks, the smell of coffee and soda mixing with the faint tang of disinfectant. I closed my eyes, drifting in and out of shallow sleep until the wheels touched down on island soil. Stepping into the arrivals hall, I spotted a man holding a sign that read, Miller Family. He smiled, lifted my bag effortlessly, and guided me toward a sleek black SUV waiting at the curb. The leather seats were cool, the air conditioning sharp, and in the back sat a basket of fresh fruit and chilled towels. I leaned against the window, watching palm trees sway against the bright sky, and let myself breathe for the first time in days. The resort was 20 minutes away, a private estate tucked beyond the main strip of hotels. My cabana was perched above the sand, complete with its own infinity pool and a hammock strung between two palms. The staff greeted me with lees and soft smiles, calling me by the family name as if I had always belonged. I nodded, accepted the keys, and walked into a space that smelled of salt and new linen. Floor-to-ceiling windows opened to the ocean, waves curling onto the shore like applause. I dropped my bag on the polished wood floor and stood in silence, listening to the sea. Meanwhile, I knew where they were staying. A decent hotel, yes, but crowded, loud, and cramped. One villa for 4 adults, a short walk to the beach that would always be busy, always noisy. They would have to share space, share air, share patience. That night, I strolled near their side of the island. I stayed in the shadows, close enough to see them shuffle onto the beach, their faces sour, their voices raised. I imagined the scene at the front desk when they discovered their precious cabana, already claimed under their last name, reserved hours before. I imagined my mother's thin smile cracking, my father's voice growing sharp, my sister's glare burning like sunlight on glass. I didn't interrupt. I simply watched, then turned back to my own sanctuary, where a chilled drink and silence awaited. The first morning at the resort felt unreal. The air carried a breeze designed for postcards. The sky stretched endless, pale blue, without a single cloud. I sat on the deck with a plate of tropical fruit I could barely name, the sound of waves like a lullaby I never received in childhood. No calls, no text, no voice demanding my place, just quiet. By 9, the messages started. My phone buzzed with my mother's text. "Did you do something with our reservation?" I ignored it. Then my sister. "We need to talk. Something weird happened with the villa." That one made me smile. Minutes later, a voice message arrived, her tone sharp, but I refused to press play. I stretched out on the lounger, let the sun warm my face, and ordered another drink. The taste of pineapple and mint lingered on my tongue, sweet and sharp, as the ocean glittered in front of me. By noon, my father finally called. His voice was clipped, each word like a stone thrown across water. "Did you book something in our name?" "Yes," I answered calmly. "Why?" His voice cracked between anger and disbelief. "I figured you'd be fine alone." Silence. Then the line went dead. I set the phone down, leaned back, and let out a laugh that startled even me. It wasn't joy. Not exactly. It was release. Years of being overlooked, erased, dismissed, all of it, condensed into that one echo of their own words, turned back on them. The afternoon drifted by in a haze of sunlight and water. I swam until my skin prickled with salt, then dried off under the shade of palms. Later, I met 2 women at breakfast, strangers from Seattle, here for a bachelorette trip that had been canceled. Their names were Cassie and Joy, and their laughter was easy, unburdened. We drank margaritas on my deck, traded stories about canceled plans and unexpected detours. For once, I felt light. When the sun dipped into the ocean, painting the horizon in orange and violet, I thought about my family. They were likely sitting in a cramped room, arguing with hotel staff, blaming one another. And I? I was wrapped in quiet, watching the day end with strangers who felt more like family than my own blood. That night, as the waves crashed gently against the shore, I whispered to myself again, they weren't ready for this. And for the first time, I meant it with peace. I woke the next morning to the sound of waves crashing against the shore. The sky outside was painted in soft pinks and oranges, the kind of dawn that tourists scramble to photograph. I lay in bed, watching the ceiling fan spin slowly, and thought about how rare it was for me to wake without dread. For once, my phone was not the first thing I reached for. But when I finally picked it up, there were 15 missed calls, a string of angry texts, and one voicemail from my mother that began with, "You ruined everything," before cutting off. Her voice did not sting the way it used to. Instead, it reminded me of every time she had framed me as the problem. The same tone she used when I was a teenager and dared to ask why my sister got new shoes while mine had holes. The same tone she used when I asked why my birthday always felt like an afterthought, squeezed between chores and errands, while my sisters had balloons and banners. I rolled out of bed, made coffee in the quiet kitchen, and let the bitterness of the brew coat my tongue as the memories poured in. When I was 12, I spent weeks saving for a necklace I thought my mom would love. It was nothing fancy, just a silver chain with a heart pendant from a local market. I wrapped it in tissue paper, taped it carefully, and slipped it onto the gift table at her birthday dinner. That night, I watched her open everyone's presents, scarves, perfume, a designer bag for my sister. When the wrapping paper from mine appeared, she lifted the box, frowned, and set it aside unopened. Later, I found it in the trash with greasy napkins stuck to the paper. She never mentioned it. At 16, I got sick with the flu so bad that I missed 2 weeks of school. My father drove my sister to cheer practice every day, picked up soup for her, and bought her magazines to keep her entertained. Me? I got a knock on the door and a quick, "Don't make a mess in the bathroom," before they left for dinner. I remember lying in bed, sweating through my sheets, listening to the garage door close, and realizing no one cared enough to even check my temperature. Then there was the college graduation. The one moment I thought would belong to me. I worked part-time jobs, pulled all-nighters, and clawed my way through semesters without help. That day, I walked across the stage with my cap slipping sideways, searching for my family in the crowd. They were there, of course, but they were too busy filming my sister's boyfriend proposing in the parking lot afterward. My diploma was still warm in my hand when I realized no one had bothered to take a photo with me. Each of these memories pressed into me like shards of glass I had learned to carry. They explained why the porch scene, with her saying, "We figured you'd be fine alone," was not an isolated cut. It was the latest slice in a long pattern of carving me out of their picture. I stepped outside onto the deck, the ocean breeze lifting my hair, and thought about how many times I had swallowed the sting just to keep the peace. I had smiled through dinners where I was the invisible guest. I had paid for trips where my name was not even on the booking. I had stayed quiet when my sister called me dramatic in front of friends. I had told myself family was worth enduring, that one day they might see me differently. But standing there, barefoot on polished wood, with the sea stretching out in front of me, I realized something. They never would. People do not suddenly unlearn habits they have practiced for decades. For them, I had always been the afterthought, the backup plan, the one they assumed would adjust, bend, and sacrifice. That thought did not crush me. It freed me. I turned back inside, sipped the last of my coffee, and pulled out my journal. The pages smelled faintly of leather and ink. I had carried it for years, filling it with half-finished thoughts, grocery lists, and forgotten-to-do items. That morning, I wrote clearly, "They will never choose me, so I choose me." The words looked strange in my handwriting, but I read them twice, 3 times until they settled. Memories kept bubbling up. I remembered how my father once told me not to show off when I got accepted into graduate school. I remembered how my mother called me selfish when I paid for my own apartment instead of helping with their bills. I remembered how my sister told everyone at Thanksgiving that I was lucky to even be part of the family because I did not have kids to juggle. Each insult had been tucked into my ribs until I stopped noticing the bruises. Now, in the quiet of that cabana, I noticed every one of them. I let myself feel the weight, then set it down. The phone buzzed again. Another text from my sister. "Stop embarrassing us. Just apologize." I laughed, the sound loud against the hush of the waves. Apologize. As if my very existence was the crime. I thought back to my niece's birthday last year. My sister had bought her daughter a glittering cake with layers of fondant and sparklers. I brought a handmade doll, stitched with hours of care. My niece opened it, smiled politely, and set it aside. My mother leaned in and whispered, "Next time, just bring money." The doll ended up forgotten in a corner. It was always like that. My efforts were never enough. My presence was tolerated only if it did not shine too bright, cost too much, or take up too much space. So yes, when I booked that villa in their name, it was not just revenge. It was a reclamation. It was me saying, "For once, you cannot erase me. You cannot spend my money, take my seat, and still pretend I do not exist." The ocean sparkled brighter as the sun climbed higher, as if agreeing with me. I closed the journal, stretched out in the hammock, and let the sway cradle me. For the first time, my memories did not feel like chains. They felt like evidence, proof that I had endured, proof that I had the right to finally break free. I whispered it into the salt air, letting the words disappear into the horizon. I am done being fine alone. And I meant it. The 4th day of the trip began like any other. The sun was high, baking the white sand until it glowed. The smell of salt and sunscreen hung heavy in the air, carried by a breeze that promised both comfort and tension. I walked barefoot along the path that curved past the lobby, the sound of my flip-flops muted by the polished stone floor. My phone vibrated in my pocket with another string of unanswered messages, but I ignored it. I had already decided. Today, I would face them. I saw them before they saw me. My mother stood at the reception desk, her voice sharp enough to slice through the hum of ceiling fans. My father paced behind her, rubbing his temple with the same hand that once pointed at me in accusation. My sister leaned against the counter, sunglasses perched high on her head like a crown, while her husband tried to calm her with words that clearly failed. The receptionist kept a polite smile plastered on her face, but her eyes darted nervously between their raised voices and the long line of guests forming behind them. The lobby smelled faintly of polished wood and citrus cleaner, the kind of scent that usually calms guests. But here, the tension was too loud to ignore, tourists whispered. Some even turned their phones discreetly, recording what looked like a scene from a reality show. My family had become a spectacle. I stepped forward, my sandals squeaking softly against the tile. My mother turned at the sound, and for a moment her eyes widened. Surprise flickered across her face before it hardened into something sharper. "You!" she said, her voice low but venomous. "What did you do?" The receptionist glanced between us, clearly sensing that I was the missing piece to the puzzle. I did not rush my answer. I let the silence stretch until the ceiling fans hummed louder than words. "I booked the villa," I said simply. The air seemed to pause. My father stopped pacing. My sister's mouth fell open, then snapped shut like a trap. My mother's grip tightened on the edge of the counter, knuckles whitening. "You had no right," she hissed. I tilted my head, my voice calm, steady. "Funny. That is exactly what I thought when you told me I would be fine alone." Gasps rippled from the small crowd of onlookers. Even the receptionist's polite mask slipped for half a second, her eyes widening in quiet shock. My sister pushed away from the counter, stepping closer, her perfume sharp, almost suffocating. "You embarrassed us," she spat. "Do you know how this looks?" "Yes," I answered. "For once, it looks exactly the way it feels." My heart thudded in my chest, but my voice did not tremble. Years of silence, years of being told I was dramatic, melted into this moment. The manager appeared, summoned by the noise. He carried himself with the stiff posture of someone who had smoothed many disasters before. "Is there a problem?" he asked, his tone professional but wary. My mother jumped to speak, her words tumbling over each other. "She stole our reservation. She tricked the system. We need this corrected immediately." The manager looked at me. I met his gaze without flinching. "The reservation is in my name," I said, holding up my confirmation email on my phone. "Paid in full. Booked under the family name, because it is my family too, or at least it was supposed to be." The manager scanned the screen, nodded once, and then turned to my mother. "She is correct. The booking is valid. We cannot change that." My mother's face drained of color, then flushed red. Her voice rose, cracking. "Do you know who I am? Do you understand what she has done?" The crowd of guests shifted, some pretending not to stare, others openly leaning closer. The sound of suitcases rolling across the lobby floor punctuated the silence that followed. "You are the woman who told her daughter she was fine alone," I said, my words landing like stones on water. Each one rippled outward. "And I am the daughter who finally believed you." My father muttered something under his breath, but it was lost in the swell of whispers around us. My sister's hands clenched into fists at her sides. Her husband touched her arm, but she shook him off. The manager cleared his throat, professional again. "If this discussion is not about the reservation, I must ask you to move aside. Other guests are waiting." My mother opened her mouth, but I cut her off. "No need. I am done here." Ho! I stepped back, the tile cool against my bare feet, and let the distance grow between us. My heart hammered, not from fear, but from release. I could feel eyes on me, could sense the shift in the air as the scene unraveled. As I turned toward the exit, I caught one last glimpse of my mother. She stood frozen, lips pressed into a thin line, eyes burning with something between fury and disbelief. For once, she did not have the last word. Outside, the tropical air hit me like a wave, warm and heavy with the scent of frangipani. I walked toward the beach, each step lighter than the last. My hands still trembled, but not from weakness. From the weight of letting go. The ocean stretched out before me, endless and glittering, indifferent to family drama, indifferent to betrayal. I sank into a chair under a palm, ordered a cold drink, and let the salt air fill my lungs. Behind me, the lobby buzzed with chaos. Ahead of me, the waves kept rolling, steady and free. For the first time, I realized something simple. I did not need their seat at the table. I had my own. And as the tide rose and fell, I knew they had never been ready for this moment. But I had been ready my entire life. The air outside the lobby was thick with heat, and the sharp scent of frangipani, but I barely noticed. My pulse still thundered in my ears as I walked away from the front desk. I thought the confrontation was over. I thought I could leave them there, stranded in their embarrassment, while I walked toward peace. But I was wrong. The sound of hurried footsteps echoed against the tile, followed by my sister's voice, sharp and furious. "Don't you dare walk away from us." I stopped, turned slowly, and met her glare. Her sunglasses were pushed back on her head, her eyes flashing like broken glass. My mother stood just behind her, cheeks flushed, lips pressed into a thin line. My father lingered near the doorway, his jaw tight, his hands stuffed into his pockets as if holding back an explosion. I kept my tone calm. I just did. Her husband tried to pull her back, but she yanked her arm free. She stepped closer, her perfume overwhelming in the heavy air. "You've humiliated us. Do you know what people are saying in there? They think we're freeloaders. They think we can't even manage our own reservations." I let out a short laugh, sharp and humorless. "Interesting, because that's exactly what you made me feel every time you excluded me. Forgotten, disposable. Now the world finally sees what I've always known." My mother's voice cracked through the tension. "Enough. You will fix this." The demand hung in the air like smoke. I tilted my head, curious. "Fix what? The truth?" "I can't fix what you've been doing for years." Her eyes narrowed. "You think this makes you strong. It makes you cruel." I stepped closer until we stood nearly face to face. I could see the tiny lines etched around her eyes, the way her chest rose and fell in quick, shallow breaths. "Number, it makes me free." My father finally moved, his voice raised louder than the waves crashing just beyond the resort walls. "You're tearing this family apart. You've crossed a line." The words cut through the air, heavy and sharp. I met his gaze. "The line was drawn long before today. You drew it every time you let them treat me like I didn't matter. I'm not tearing this family apart. I'm just refusing to carry the weight of it anymore." His mouth opened, then closed. For once, he had no immediate comeback. My sister scoffed, her voice dripping with venom. "You love playing the victim. You always have. That's why no one wants you around, because you make everything about you." Her words stung, but instead of shrinking, I laughed. The sound startled even me. "About me? You turned my college graduation into your engagement party. You turned every holiday into a stage for your drama." I stayed silent, because I thought maybe keeping the peace mattered more than my dignity, but not anymore. Her husband tried again to touch her arm, whispering something under his breath. She jerked away, eyes blazing. My mother's voice trembled, a crack finally appearing in her armor. "We are family. Family forgives. Family sacrifices. You should understand that." I shook my head slowly. Family doesn't mean endless sacrifice for one person's comfort. Family doesn't mean being erased so someone else can shine. If that's your definition, I want no part of it. The silence that followed was broken only by the rhythmic crash of the ocean and the distant chatter of tourists passing by. My father shifted uncomfortably. My sister bit her lip hard enough to draw color, and my mother's eyes glossed with unshed tears she refused to let fall. I stepped back, the sand crunching beneath my feet. "You wanted me alone. Well, now you have exactly what you wished for." I turned and began walking toward the beach, the sun blazing against my back, but their voices chased me still. "You'll regret this," my sister shouted. "Maybe," I called over my shoulder. "But at least the regret will be mine, not the silence you forced on me." I reached the boardwalk, the wood warm against my bare feet. My breath came faster, not from fear, but from adrenaline. I could still feel their eyes burning into my back, but I didn't turn around, not once. Later that evening, the consequences continued to unfold. My phone buzzed with messages from extended relatives. An aunt texted me, "Your mother is devastated. Why would you do this?" An uncle sent a simple, "Fix it before it gets worse." Some cousins filled my inbox with half-formed accusations. I ignored them all. Instead, I sat on the deck of my villa, the ocean glowing under the moonlight, and sipped a glass of chilled wine. The taste was crisp, almost sharp, but it grounded me. My phone kept buzzing. I let it vibrate against the table until the noise blended with the hum of cicadas in the distance. When I finally glanced at the screen, a message from my mother froze me. "We raised you better than this. You owe us." I stared at the words until they blurred. Then I typed back slowly. "Number, I owe myself." I hit send and placed the phone face down. The night was quiet, except for the waves. My body trembled, not from fear, but from the rush of choosing myself in a way I never had before. Every muscle ached from holding the line, but I refused to bend. That night, for the first time, I slept soundly. The morning after our confrontation, I woke to a silence that felt different. It was not the heavy silence of being ignored, or the aching silence of exclusion. It was the light kind of quiet that follows a storm, when the air smells cleaner and the sky seems wider. I stepped onto the deck of the villa with a cup of coffee in hand, watching the ocean shift from deep blue to bright silver under the sun. For the first time in years, I felt no weight pressing on my chest. My phone sat on the table beside me, its screen glowing with unread messages. Dozens of texts from my mother, my father, and my sister filled the screen. Some begged, some blamed, some twisted the story until I was the villain who had betrayed the family. I scrolled through them once, then turned the phone face down. Their words no longer pierced me. They were echoes of a chorus I had already stopped listening to. By midday, the consequences became clearer. I heard from a cousin that my family had been forced to downgrade to a cramped room at a budget hotel after losing the villa. Their social media posts, usually filled with staged smiles and captions about togetherness, had fallen silent. The performance was over. For once, the world could see cracks in the picture they had painted for years. Meanwhile, I let myself recover in small ways. I booked a massage at the spa, letting the scent of eucalyptus and the sound of ocean waves soothe muscles that had been clenched for far too long. I ate meals slowly, savoring each bite without feeling watched or judged. I swam until my skin prickled from the salt, then lay on the sand watching the tide creep in. These simple things, which should have been ordinary, felt like luxuries after years of being told I was too much or not enough. The following day, I decided to do something symbolic. I visited the Island Salon, a bright little place that smelled of citrus shampoo and coconut oil. The stylist, a woman with gentle hands and kind eyes, asked what I wanted. I told her to cut away the weight. She smiled knowingly, combed through my hair, and with each snip I felt something old falling away. When she was done, I looked in the mirror at a fresher version of myself. Not someone new, but someone I had been hiding. Someone free. That evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in orange fire, I sat on the balcony with a journal open on my lap. I wrote down every moment from the past week. The sting of her words on the porch. The heat of the confrontation in the lobby. The taste of wine as I ignored their desperate texts. And finally, the soft peace that came from claiming space I had always been denied. Writing it all made the truth undeniable. I was no longer the forgotten one. When I closed the journal, my phone buzzed again. This time it was not family, but a message from my cousin. She wrote, "They are telling everyone you ruined the trip. But I saw what happened. I think you were right to stand up for yourself." The words caught me off guard. For so long, I had been painted as the problem, the burden, the difficult one. To see even a small flicker of recognition from someone inside that world was like a light in the dark. Later that night, I stood barefoot at the edge of the ocean. The sand was cool under my feet, the waves rushing forward and retreating, as if reminding me that life always moves, always resets. I whispered into the wind, "I am done being fine alone. I am more than fine." The waves swallowed the words, carrying them farther than I could imagine. When I returned to the villa, I found one last voicemail waiting. It was my mother's voice, tired and trembling. She said, "You think you've won, but all you did was hurt us. One day, you'll see what family really means." I replayed the message once, then deleted it. Maybe one day I would see what family really means. But that day was not today. Today, family meant drawing boundaries. It meant refusing to be erased. It meant finally choosing myself. As the trip drew to a close, I packed my bag without the usual heaviness. Each folded shirt, each tucked-away sandal felt like proof that I could leave on my own terms. On the flight home, I leaned back in my seat, closed my eyes, and felt the hum of the engines like a lullaby. I no longer replayed their words in my head. I replayed my own, words that had freed me. Back home, life did not magically transform. The house still echoed when it was quiet. The phone still buzzed with calls I did not answer. There were days when I doubted myself, when the old guilt tried to creep back in. But each time it did, I returned to the journal. I reread the lines where I chose me, and the doubt faded. Weeks later, I visited the salon again. The stylist remembered me, and when she asked how I had been, I smiled. I told her I was lighter, not just my hair, but everything. She laughed softly and said, "You look like someone who finally belongs to herself." Ugh. And she was right. My family may never see me differently. They may continue to twist stories, to cast me as the villain in their play. But I no longer cared about their script. I was writing my own. Now, when I sit at my kitchen table with morning sunlight spilling across the floor, I think of that porch. I think of the sentence that once felt like a blade. "We figured you'd be fine alone." And I realized something. They were right in a way. I am fine alone. More than fine. Because I am no longer waiting for their seat at the table. I built my own. I do not know if my mother realizes what she lost that day. But I do. And I will never give it back.